Welcome to the new Coke case study. Let's go back to the year 1985 and find out what happened and why, and perhaps we can work out what decision you would have made. Can you believe it? The Coca-Cola product, the most successful and strongest brand in the market at the time, was taken off the market and replaced by what was known as New Coke. The product was called Coke, but it had the tagline New along the side of the can and has since become known as New Coke. The launch of New Coke was in April of 1985, but only in the USA market, and happened basically because Pepsi was catching up to Coke, and Coca-Cola thought the solution was a brand new product. Here is a press ad at the time.
Recently, an independent research firm ran a taste test between Coke and Pepsi, and the taste more people chose was the taste of Coca-Cola. Yes, more people all across the country, when comparing Coke to Pepsi, chose the taste of Coke as the better taste. Let's look at it this way. We gave America a choice, and more people said Coke is it.
Coke is it, but unfortunately it wasn't it. For example, in this book on brand failures, the opening story is about New Coke. And if you were to Google marketing blunders, you would probably find New Coke on virtually every list. So was New Coke the biggest marketing blunder of all time? To work out whether it was a big mistake, let's go back in time and work out why they made this particular marketing decision. We need to go back to the era called the Cola Wars, where Coke was taking on Pepsi. When Pepsi first came to market a long time ago, they were a discounter relative to Coca-Cola. This is a very old image. As you can see, 5 cents, worth a dime, but cost a nickel, bigger and better. Basically, the Coca-Cola product at the time was 10 cents and was a smaller quantity. So Pepsi was all about having a better value in terms of price. Coca-Cola, one of their slogans, they had many, but around the same time was "It's the real thing." And this was basically a hit back at Pepsi to say, hey, you're just a cheap imitation. And as you can see at the bottom there, Pepsi was something that people would drink at home, but out in front of people and friends, they would drink Coca-Cola. Now, this is an important element to the Cola Wars. Coke, being the first entrant, had a natural arrogance about them. They believed that their product was better and they had the entitlement of being the market leader. Pepsi, on the other hand, were always the challenger. And as a result, they were fighting for market share and fighting to be recognized. And they had an underlying belief that they could be the market leader over time. In the late 1960s, Pepsi started to use the Pepsi Generation. And they reintroduced it in the 1970s under John Scully, who later went on to become the guy who would run Apple and later sack Steve Jobs. So let's have a look at that commercial.
Come alive, you're in the Pepsi generation. Come alive, come alive, you're in the Pepsi generation.
Who is the Pepsi generation? Just about everyone with the young view of things. Active, livelier people with a liking for Pepsi-Cola. A light refreshment with the bold, clean taste. Generous in flavor and sparkle. Pepsi belongs to your generation. Why else would Pepsi try so hard to be where you are? Everywhere.
come alive. You're in the Pepsi generation.
The Pepsi Generation was supported by the Pepsi Challenge, which is a series of blind taste tests where consumers would try both Pepsi and Coke and say which one they preferred. These taste tests, where Pepsi won just over half the time, were then changed into TV commercials. Over 300 were made in America at the time, so let's have a look at one which used a celebrity from a TV show that was popular in the 70s.
About to take the Pepsi challenge. You know, I have 2 bottles of cola back here, and you don't know which is which.
No, I don't.
We have never met before.
That's correct.
Right, okay. Except at my sister's wedding, you know. But beside that, we have never met. Okay, now I'm going to pick this up and tell me which one you chose.
Pepsi!
You know, in tests like these nationwide, more people prefer to taste the Pepsi over Coca-Cola.
Pepsi's much better.
It's delicious. It's down nice and smooth. The taste is good.
It's great. Take the Pepsi challenge. Let your taste decide. Right, guys? Right.
But not only did they have the Pepsi Challenge, the choice of the new generation, Pepsi also had Michael Jackson. They signed him to a deal just before he released the Thriller album, which became the biggest selling album of all time. And he actually used his hit Billie Jean as the theme song to the commercial because he didn't like the song that Pepsi had written. So let's have a look at that commercial along with him and the Jackson 5.
You're a whole new generation. You're dancing through the day. You're grabbing for the magic on the run. You're a whole new generation. You're loving what you do. I put a Pepsi in the motion, but that choice is up to you. Hey, you're the Pepsi generation. Girls are down and taste the thrill of the day and feel the Pepsi way. Taste the thrill of the day and feel the Pepsi way. You're a whole new generation. You're a whole new generation. You're a whole new generation. You're a whole new generation.
If we have a look at this simple perceptual map, the goal of Pepsi was to reposition Coca-Cola. Pepsi tried to be the young through their young generation, new generation type advertising, and of course their Pepsi Challenge was designed to position themselves as having a better taste, and supported by Michael Jackson, of course. Their goal was to reposition Coca-Cola as old-fashioned and poorer in tasting. As a consequence, we had a significant turnaround in market share over a period of time. Basically, Pepsi started outselling Coke in what is a free choice channel in a supermarket where people could go in and choose. Coke was able to hold their market share leadership, although it was declining, because they had greater access to retailers. So let's just summarize where Coca-Cola was in 1985 before they made that decision to introduce new Coke. A, they had a declining market share. 2, they had tried to combat this with increased advertising and promotion. In fact, they'd increased their promotional spend from $50 million to $200 million. And they were outspending Pepsi, even though Pepsi had increased to $150 million. This is all in US money. Coca-Cola had really worked hard in that regard. Their market research area indicated that taste was the main reason they were losing market share. And obviously, Pepsi's new generation was repositioning Coke as old and tired. Pepsi now had MJ, which is obviously Michael Jackson, who has now become this global superstar, and he was the spokesperson for Pepsi. And of course, tucked away in Coca-Cola in their R&D section, they had a new formula which they were testing, and it was identified that it was outperforming both Coke and Pepsi in taste tests. But if you look down the bottom there, it was a cheaper formula. This formula was to save the company $50 million a year if they were to introduce it. Coke's solution was to reinvent the formula and to replace their existing product with new Coke. As you can see, the two top executives at Coca-Cola were very happy and believed they'd made the right decision. Basically, their strategy was built around the fact of the product being new. This means that they could communicate the fact that the product was modern and designed for young people. Obviously, it tasted better, so they were planning to stop the taste test advertising. So they believed that they had effectively destroyed Pepsi's competitive strategy. So if we go back to our positioning map, they thought they had reinvented the Coca-Cola product and would basically leapfrog the Pepsi strategy.
The only thing we did not try was changing the taste. In the process of developing Diet Coke, our flavor chemists came up with a flavoring compound that they felt was exceptional, and that in blind taste tests, and I emphasize the word blind, was preferred.
The test results were all the company needed. People seemed to prefer the new formula. In 1985, after 20 years of struggling with changing market realities, Goizueta decided to alter the taste. Backed by millions in advertising and promotion funds, Coke believed it had finally figured out how to win over the next generation of consumers.
Introducing the new taste of Coca-Cola. That's right, the new taste of Coke. Coca-Cola just went one better. A new taste that does more and goes further.
But the launch of new Coke created a backlash that stopped the company in its tracks.
Please don't change the taste of Coke. Why do you want to fix it? It ain't right.
It was a fascinating spring and summer in 1985. I received numerous letters. One of the letters was addressed to Chief Dodo, the Coca-Cola company. What was fascinating was that it reached my desk. There was another one, a gentleman in Wisconsin, who wrote a letter, kind of protesting about the formula change. And then he said, I would appreciate it very much if you signed this letter at the bottom and return it to me, because in years to come, the signature of the dumbest executive in American history is going to be worth a fortune. So I did sign at the bottom and send it to him. So it was humbling in that sense, and it was exhilarating in the sense that we realized we had something in our hands, a treasure that we had never valued as it should have been valued.
Goizueta acted decisively and reintroduced the original formula.
We're bringing back the classic original formula as Coca-Cola Classic.
The return of Coca-Cola Classic showed the company had learned an important marketing lesson about the consumer's connection to the brand.
I'm Don Keogh, president of the Coca-Cola Company. When we brought you the new taste of Coke, we knew that millions would prefer it, and millions do. And we knew that it would beat the taste of our major competitor, and it does. What we didn't know was how many thousands of you would phone and write asking us to bring back the classic taste of original Coca-Cola. Well, we read and we listened, and you know the rest. They're both yours, the new taste of Coke and Coca-Cola Classic. Your right of choice is back.
From Red Rock, Arizona to Redmond, Washington, it's red, white, and you. That's what's going on. The red hot top sneakers, good times on the avenue. It's Saturday night, it's loud inside, making all the right moves. There's a feeling in this country, the real thing's coming through. Coca-Cola classic, red, white, and you.
So within 3 months, Coca-Cola reintroduced Coke Classic. So how did this happen? How can you go from making your most confident decision ever and believing that you had destroyed the competition of Pepsi to having to retrace your steps? Now it's your turn. Do you think that given the circumstances and the challenges that they were facing at the time, did they make the right decision? And if you were in their situation in 1985 and you were losing market share, what decision would you have made?